Oh, here's not the waiting room, huh?
Yeah, anyways. Got all these up there.
Oh, yeah, it's in the waiting room. All set?
Yeah, they're just connecting the audio.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
You can hear us all right, Councilor Bragdon?
Yes.
All right.
All righty, well, it's 5:31 and we'll get started on our budget workshop. I'll just do a quick roll call. Councilor Pelletier. Councilor Pelletier, can you hear me? I will give him a call.
I can hear you, Steve. It must be his audio again.
Councilor Pelletier, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
All right, doing a roll call. Councilor Pelletier,
Aye.
Councilor Bragdon,
Here.
Here.
Councilor Prey,
Here.
Councilor Danforth,
Here.
Councilor McEwen,
Here.
Chair Goldie here, Councilor Medor.
Here.
All right, with all of us here, we'll get started. We have fire and ambulance, airport operations and business, recreation, general assistance, public health welfare, snowmobile ATV, holiday observation and events, county tax, insurances, fringe benefits, debt and interest, wastewater, capital improvements, and special capital improvements. We'll be going in that order. So with that, we're going to start on page 9 of 22 on the expense. And Mr. Manager, I know that we had requested some information on this and the following couple of pages here. Did you want to perhaps give a brief overview of the options that we might have on what was requested originally?
Sure, let me pull them up here. I did supply each of you with a copy of that as well. So looking at this, we have focus here. We have some options laid out with the difference in cost and adding. So the idea of this document is to explain the costs of adding either one extra employee to the team in our fire and EMS department, 3 extra crew members, and the potential of adding 1 assistant fire chief that we had spoken about as well. So if you work your way throughout the column, it gives you current costs where we are in FY22, where we are in FY23. Then it gives the breakdown of each of those options and the variance between where we are in FY22 and where we would be in FY23 if we select either of those 3 options. Included in this are all salaries, overtime expectancies, benefits, all the various costs that are associated with those positions.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. And as you said, all the costs associated, so that's all inclusive across the board. There's no other additional insurances or anything that would make an increase in a different part of the budget. Mary Alice says no, so that's all encompassing.
Right.
Thank you. Any question or comment from the council on Mary Alice? Sure.
I just, The increase and decrease is going to show what changes to the present FY20 budget for these changes. So the FY23 budget as presented has gone from 869,000 in FY22 to 925,000. So there's already that increase built in. So the increases shown in the right-hand column are the increase beyond what we already have in FY23. So in other words, one extra would add another 55,000 to the FY23 budget beyond what we already have in there.
Thank you, Mary Alice.
My apologies, I skipped the second page there. What she's referring to is there's the second page that gives that one other option that has one extra crew member, one assistant chief as another variation.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the council on this?
I'll just point out that neither of these options are built into the expenses as shown this evening in the workshop. So this is what we'll be seeking discussion on this evening.
Councilor Madore?
Yeah, thank you. Looking at this, seeing that the options of one extra, an extra, and the assistant chief, and 3 extra. The 3 extra does not include the assistant chief. Those are simply 3 extra firemen without the assistant chief position.
That is
So if you
correct.
would then go ahead and decide we're going to put the full complement of 3 extra firemen and have an assistant fire chief, that would be over and above this as well.
That is correct.
That's correct. And that would cause what happened. I mean, as you can see, it changes the dynamic. It's not as simple as just adding assistant chief. It could affect the overtime. And so there's kind of have to look at the whole scenario.
Right. All right, I just wanted to get that. I see that's like 3 different options there, but one, I assume that the 3 extra did not include adding the assistant fire chief. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Madore. Any other points of clarification from the council?
Just want to make sure that we all are seeing that. No. Sorry.
Councilor McEwen?
Just a note, I guess, to clarify, the 1 extra is actually going to be, the increase is going to be like 110, 120,000, something like that. Then the 1 extra and assist would actually be like 300,000 increase. And the 3 extra would be a little over 400,000 of an increase, just if I'm reading this correctly.
Let's, yeah.
Okay.
That's about right.
Thank you.
You're saying yes, but I'm looking at no.
No. Right now, from FY22 to FY23, have $56,000 increase in the budget. So if we were to go with 1 extra, add another $55,317 to the $56,000. So that would be your 100,000. You want to go to the 1 extra and the 1 assistant, then it's going to be 55,000 plus 133. There's 180,000.
Okay, just so I can also further clarify, because when I put these together, like so, I'm looking at each department and I can see the total for the 55,317 grand total expense, but down here I see the 69,520. If you could just help me understand that a little better.
You have to look at the bottom line. You have to look on the third page, on the second page, I'm sorry, at grand total, because these
I see, I have
employees
them
work,
upside down. Yeah.
these employees work amongst all.
Thank you for the clarification. I also was needing that. Thank you, Councilor McEwen.
Apparently I did as well.
Councilor Madore.
If I may ask, if we had no extra staff, fire department staff, and just the position of the assistant fire chief, do we have any numbers on what that would do to the bottom line?
That would be, I would assume roughly around $100,000, given salary and benefits. I would think of 90 to 100.
Well, I mean, what we did is we asked Chief to lay out some scenarios on what he thought would be a workable solution. I mean, these are his recommendations. I guess for just the assistant, I'd say probably he could speak to that situation as far as how this would affect the budget.
Hey, you all right?
Fire chief, what was your question again?
If we do no additions to the department other than creating the position of assistant fire chief, what would that do to the budget?
Well, you would take your 23 proposed budget with no changes and add, as the manager said, approximately 100,000. With that, the whole package. It's gonna put you back, your overtime is gonna put you back up. There won't be any savings.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Malcolm. Councilor Prey.
If I could ask Tom, while he's back, again, walking back and forth here. We're dealing to some degree, obviously, with the need here, but you deal daily with what's happening around the state in employment situation with firefighters. What is the demand right now in other communities? I suspect from what I've read in the paper, in some instances, I read the Lewiston paper, the Augusta paper, and the Portland paper every day, along with the Bangor. I see a lot of towns having similar concerns that we are. What's the realization of being able to find, if we went to maximum of 3 people, it probably would take months to get them, or?
I would, in all honesty, if we could do it months, I would do it. Well, I will do a year. If I can find, as you say, everybody, all your cities have 30, 40 openings. Anyway, small towns, then you got a lot of small towns now that starting to amp up their fire departments, never had fire department ambulance services. And they're looking to hire 8, 10, 12 people. So the job market is not good. So I find, and I realize they're getting to a critical position. So.
If I may, and the reason I raise that a little bit to the council as a whole is consideration of the fact that why we're talking about a budget and how we have utilized funds in the past of the unfunded balance of, as people become available, if we're advertising for a position, it's difficult to fund it for a whole year or 3/4 of a year or half a year until you really know what that impact is going to be. But what we put in the budget is going to affect the mill rate. The realization is that the expectation is we're getting additional revenues along the way, that there would be additional monies going into the unfunded balance, that we might be able to take that money out later and not necessarily have to raise it all at one time in a budgetary consideration. I just lay that out there for everybody to think about, because if we hire somebody, we get somebody that comes on board in the 60 days or 90 days, which would be very lucky to have that happen, but probably would be 6 months to longer, and probably to get 2 or 3, it would take even longer. My expectation from what I'm seeing around the state.
Thank you, Councilor Prey. Any other, Councilor Madore?
Looking at the options that are here, and with what Council Prey has just brought up, it's true. I would be and this is just I would be leaning toward the one extra and the assistant chief. The assistant chief, I believe, is an important position for the department. Adding one extra, the actual realization of being able to find one fire ambulance person to come in to do that job for right now, I think would be realistic and advantageous. So if there was an option to go with, I would be going with the one extra and the assistant. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Dora. Is there a second for that?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councilor Pelletier. And just a point of clarification, we currently have an open position right now, isn't that right? In the department?
Yes, that's correct.
So, okay. So I tend to agree with what Councilor Prey said about it taking some time to fill a position. Personally, I would like to motion that we only add an assistant fire chief, as we already have a vacant position currently. And I think it's going to take some time for that vacant position that we already have, that's already in the budget, to fill that position. And I tend to agree with what Councilor Prey said about funding those positions as they get filled. So that would be my motion. Is there a second?
For the purpose of discussion, I'll second it, but I guess I'd like to hear from the treasurer as to how we would calculate that in the budget process, or as I had mentioned, that we be conscious that we have funds in the unfunded balance that we set aside for such a situation, that if we're able to find somebody, that we utilize that money instead of raise the tax base in the beginning. What impact would that have on where we're at, or your expectation as to what you think difficulties we may face as a council in doing it that way versus funding it up front?
Well, if we look at the municipal revenue sharing for this year, we have received $326,000 more than we budgeted for. So we could put, just using that money, put a, transfer some of that to the unassigned fund balance.
Thank you.
So Councilor Prey, was yours a second of my motion for adding this to the deliberations?
It's out there for consideration by the council at this stage.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other council comment? Councilor Madore?
So just point of clarification, just for my own person. If the option is there to do just the assistant fire chief, that's approximately 100,000 over what we have right now. And then if the position becomes available to add another department person, that will be coming out of the undesignated fund balance to be able to do that if it's not used.
Well,
Or other
I mean, are you talking about, I guess I got to catch up. I thought the discussion was it's already a vacant position right now. So that's already in the budget.
Right.
So now we're talking about the assistant chief, and that would be used from the undesignated fund balance at the time that you find a candidate. I think another question I have that is when I look at the one extra person, question I have for the fire chief is why couldn't this one extra in some fashion be used for the assistant, that they could reduce some overtime in the department?
My understanding, we want an assistant chief to start doing what I'm doing. That's my, and that's gonna be a salary position. And they can't do that. union won't allow it. I don't know where this will all end up with the, if we hire an assistant chief, I don't know where that's going. That, but I just need some clarification. Right now, we're talking about the position that is in this budget right now, my vacant position is still a funded position. All we're talking about adding is the assistant chief position, correct?
That's what my motion was, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chief Malcolm. Mr. Manager?
I just want to point out, Council Pelletier has his hand up.
Thank you. Councilor Pelletier?
Yes, a question for the chief. Why couldn't a union position also have the added duties of assistant manager added to it? And assistant fire chief, you know, being like, if you look in-house to replace the chief down the road, like succession planning, that person would probably be the next one to step up.
I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you. Why you probably cannot do that.
I'm sure
I'm not saying that you couldn't, but you will never get somebody that will step in and do what that's just not gonna happen. They're in there as a union position, you're gonna pay them every time they do anything, their wages, and it's gonna be a lot higher wage because it's gonna be as assistant chief
Well,
or deputy chief.
I expect the position would be higher pay, but it could be negotiated with the union to create a job description that would allow that position to be a succession spot.
Yes, it could be. You've got a 2-year contract, but you've got 2 years left in the contract. You could open the contract to do that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sure they wouldn't mind that. But anyway, seems like it'd be something to do. Then that would be ongoing, you know. I mean, they'd always aspire to climb up, so to speak, from in-house, and they'd be able to fill in when you're not there. So that would be good. Anyway, I would like to see that kind of a scenario work out.
Thank you, Councilor Pelletier, noting obviously that personnel issues are of the discretion of the manager, but your input is certainly appreciated. Any other Councilor Madore?
I'm sorry, but I'm only concerned because the fact that Chief came to us originally looking for the 3 people. It was because the department was in need of the bodies. We've got 1 opening that we need to fill. By putting this assistant and the 1 extra, that means that 2 out of the 3 necessarily might get taken care of for the department, even if it takes 6 months to be able to get the staffing up a little bit, drop the overtime down, which would save a little bit of money, and still have the assistant chief's position. That's the only reason that I thought that would work better going forward. It's kind of trying to find a middle ground between no staff increases whatsoever and the 3 that the chief originally requested. At least this way, going forward, you knew that you had 2 positions created, and the time until to fill them would be the irrelevant part as far as, but it would get you the assistant chief, and that was my thinking going forward. I still think that having the assistant chief and the extra plus trying to fill the vacancy would be the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Madore. And just noting that we aren't making those decisions or debating it tonight. We're just asking for clarification so that we can make suggestions to be motioned and seconded for deliberations. Unless that's what you're doing, Councilor Prey.
Well, I just want to clarify 2 points. First of all, my intent was not necessarily, because I mentioned that we could always use the unreserved balance if we filled the 2 and we still need the 3rd, that we go for the 3rd position utilizing that. The second thing is the expectation. I'm hoping that we continue to be above the estimate for revenue sharing. But we also need to be cautious that revenue sharing could fall back again as it did in the early 2012, 2014, when we had a mini recession as well, and that's when the revenue sharing was cut to be reduced down. One of the things that going forward, I hope this fall that anybody that's running for the legislature is asked if they'll oppose any reduction in revenue sharing. I think every town in the state should ask every legislative candidate for them to take a pledge that they will not rely on the revenue sharing that comes to municipalities as the way to balance the state budget. Because they're losing the same, we're losing the same revenue as the state is if the revenues go down. If they take away the percentages that were done before, we'll be hurt even more. My expectation is we will run above the previous year's receipts, but they may not be running as far ahead as they are currently. So we need to be cautious of that as well.
Thank you, Councilor Prey. Are there any other motions or points of clarification to make a motion to a suggestion change on any of the fire and ambulance, general fire department or ambulance sections?
Are we back into the expenses at this point?
Yes,
Still looking at these.
we're in the expenses, yeah.
Okay, let me pull that back.
Just going over the three that were on these 2 pages. So going back to the budget, that's page, if it's all right with the council, just on page 9, 10, and 11 at once. If there's any other suggested changes or points of clarification? All right, seeing none.
I haven't even had it up yet.
My apologies. Council Madore.
I know you want to move right along, Mr. Chairman, but I'm concerned about the line for heating fuel. If that increase will be enough to carry forward, given how quickly the price of fuel, both at the pump and heating, is going through the roof.
We actually, I think a couple of meetings ago, the manager had read a list of changes that we were proposing to the budget, increasing that line to $14,000 for the ambulance general area. So we're proposing $14,000 for heat fuel on that line.
All right. Okay, I'm not seeing it.
It's not reflected in that, on that report.
Okay.
This would be on page 9 on the
Yeah.
expenses.
Yeah.
And that would be line 3015 heating fuel. It's budgeted $14,000, which is an increase of 5,500.
So I just please.
So that line has been pushed up by 14,000.
We're proposing that it's 14,000 rather than 10.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I believe what I just pulled up, if I did it right, is the document that Mary Allison referred to that I had gone over, but budget changes for at our last session here. If you go down to the expense section here, I guess we're up on the screen. It's harder to see this kind of format up there, but it does go down through, if you look at 9, we go over here. 9 is where she's referring to now. That's the updated expense there for that will be working into this final document. Goes from the final column there. You can see that 14,000.
Thank you.
Going back to expenses, page 9, is there any other comment or suggestion on page 9, Department 205, Fire and Ambulance? Seeing none, going to page 10, 203, Fire Department. Seeing none, going to page 11, 204, Ambulance. Councilor Madore.
Again, again, the the overtime line. That overtime line was figured with the existing staff that it is right now with the open position, or that overtime line is figured with the increase.
That is figured with my staff for that one position filled.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comment from the council? And seeing none, we will move to airport operations, airport business. That's on page 21.
I'd just like to point on that page also, under the heating fuel, we're proposing that that line go from $5,000 to $7,100.
Thank you, Mary Alice. Any comment on Department 1101 or 1102?
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Madore.
The building maintenance line, as I'm going across, that what projects are being built in there for the increase on that line?
No, I'm familiar with some of them. Verbalize it much better.
Jeff Campbell, Airport Manager. The projects we have slated for that line is to paint one complete hangar, paint half of another hangar, and both fuel farms to bring them up to snuff.
Those projects are overdue, I understand. Long. Okay. Thank
Those have been recently estimated by contractors, so the prices we're looking at, the costs we're looking at are should be sufficient for the
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bragdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is the issue we had with the pipes, has that been factored in as well for this?
The issue for the pipes has not been factored into this. If we do it now, it would be taken care of by Public Works. So we wouldn't have to hire a contractor.
Thank you, Councilor Bragdon. Any other council comment? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Jeff. Moving on to recreation. That's page 20.
I'll just note on here that we've done some adjustments in reference to, we had spoken about that fence of Little League Playground recently. We've done some adjustments on how we may want to approach that. I'd also like to call attention to some interest from counselors recently, use of ARPA funds that we may look at using that towards sprucing up some of the playgrounds in those conversations. So if I am correct, the 12,000 we had budgeted, or 20. Okay, could you take a stab at that? Else?
It was $20,000 that we had in the capital budget that we had to move forward for the traffic light. So that frees up that, but in doing that, we had to move, took some building maintenance money out of the present budget. So what we would like to do is keep the 20,000 still in the capital budget as proposed, but repurpose it to cover LED lights for the municipal building and potentially other other projects that could include the fence at the rec department, at the Little Italy playground. Should there not be another solution on how you want to, where you want that money to come from. But basically we'd have 20,000 designated for the LED lights and other type property projects, unnamed at this point. but the rec department fence being one, have in the back of our mind as a candidate.
Thank you, Mary Alice. Any comment or question from the council on Department 1002? Seeing none. That takes us to general assistance. And that is page 18. And Public Health Welfare Agency also on page 18. And seeing none. Moving on to snowmobile and ATV, that's taken us back to page 20.
Not sure where it will fall, but given some recent updates of good news from Northern Timber Cruisers and the situation they were dealing with. Looks like they will be applying for the UTV grant, so we may see that reflected in budget as a more of a pass-through. And I'm not sure if that reflects in this expense or if it shows up later. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Seeing no comment from the council, moving on to holiday observation and events, which is on page 22. As well as county tax. Councilor Madore.
I don't see what it would hurt, considering the some of the things that Councilor Bragdon shared as far as the events committee is concerned, with not just only the 4th of July, but other things that they would have planned. I think it'd be advantageous to go ahead and put an extra $2,000 into line 7012 events for those purposes. I think right now we have a group that is enthusiastic and is willing to go ahead and try to do a little bit more in the community, and a little extra seed money of $2,000 in that line. I don't think would make or break the budget one way or another, but I think it probably could go a long way and help. So I would like to see $2,000 in that.
I'll second that.
Motion by Madore, seconded by Danforth.
Do I hear 5? I think there can be a lot of good in community engagement if we certainly bolster the community section.
We could move 3 out of the manager's account and move it over into the events. That would make the 5. That would make the 5 he's asking for.
Thank you, Councilor Prey. Any other council comment on holiday observation and events or county tax? And seeing none. That moves us to insurances, which is on page 12. And seeing none. Fringe benefits, page 13. Seeing none. Debt and interest, page 17.
On this page, we propose that we add financing the striker cost. It's going to be a 5-year lease. and it would be $12,596 a year. We were able to pull a significant amount of money out of the capital budget and transfer it here to pay for it over time.
I'll just point out that's two cuts. So it's 2 units. We get $30,000 budgeted in capital for this coming year and the following year to replace one each year, and the opportunity to lease them and finance them available. So rather than the $30,000 hit each year, it's, backed off to 12, stretched out 5.
Councilman, turn your mic on, please.
Is that something that is going to be added to this? Okay, moving forward.
Correct.
I don't need any action or discussion on it this evening as far as whether or not to.
Well, I mean, that's what we proposed. If everyone's in agreement, then we will add it to this section.
Right. We had gone over it during the suggested budget changes. Was 2 sessions ago, correct?
I would have no problem with it. Seems to me the leasing would make sense.
I believe that includes servicing and everything for those. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Any other council comment or question? Council McKeon?
It's just good to see that we paid off another loan. It looks like the pool. So good stuff.
Yeah.
And seeing no others, moving on to capital improvements, special capital improvements, that's page 22.
The only thing we don't have on here yet is that we still don't know about the airport FAA grants and how that would have, really where that would be in effect if we have a match that we'd have to come up, have to budget for. At this point, we just don't have enough information to put anything in the budget.
Thank you, Mary Alice. Any other questions from the council? Councilman Madore?
Yeah, Mary Alice, when do you think you would know if we have any match requests or anything necessary for any FAA work in this budget session? We don't know anything?
Is that tied up with the master plan? So the airport master plan that Boyle Tanner has been assisting us with, it was expected in March. It's now held up at the FAA for approval. So we have a draft of that. We don't have any final information. We're waiting for that approval to be sent back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Madore. Any other question or comment from the council? Seeing none. And last but not least, wastewater. We had already gone over it line by line while Jim was here, but if there's any follow-up on that, Mary Alice?
We just found out recently, this week, that we're going to have to increase telecommunications line of this budget some to get better internet service out to that location. I think we're looking at a couple $1,000s.
The increase would be from 1,300 to 21 cost for the.
Thank you.
13 to 21. So yeah, $800.
I don't know.
We also within the past 2 days found out that the computer equipment they had been working on in their office out there was out of date in 2013. So we working with Maine Technology Group have a new machine coming for them so that it's adequate. So with with a new operational computer and actual working speeds, internet service, I think there will be much better setup and accommodate.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Any other comment or question on wastewater? And seeing none, that concludes tonight's budget workshop. Thank you.
Have a good night, Council Pelletier.